Story 1. I should have listened to the voice in my head that morning, a whisper I ignored as I pushed open the glass doors of Flex Gym. Every part of me felt strange, like the place was holding its breath, waiting for me. It had been 3 weeks since my last workout, but the stale, metallic air felt different, heavier somehow, as if the barbells themselves were watching. I was determined. After all, guilt gnawed at my stomach for neglecting my routine during my vacation. Pride, too. I'd made a promise to myself. No shortcuts, no excuses. Today, I would prove I hadn't gone soft. I'd start with squats, heavy ones. No warm-up, no spotter, no safety bars. Just me, my ego, and the echoing clangs of iron. Who needs safety bars, I thought. I'd done this 100 times. Still, the gym felt colder, as if the fluorescent lights above knew what was coming. I loaded the bar, 40, then 60, then 80 kilograms. As the plates slid on, they shrieked, and the sound made a few heads turn. A couple watched me from the mirrors with tired, silent eyes. I tried not to care. I rolled my shoulders, chalked my hands, and ducked under the bar. It rested across my back like a threat dot. Breathe in. I unracked the bar and stepped back, my feet steady on the rubber mat. My muscles trembled, not with anticipation, but with the kind of warning animals get before a storm. Down I went. The gym dimmed in my vision. The world narrowed to that single act of lowering and lifting. I reached the bottom of my squat, feeling the weight settle into my bones. This is when things went wrong. I expected the usual surge of power to push me upright, but none came. My legs wobbled and refused to obey. I tried again. Nothing. My thighs burned in panic, and my breath shortened. Behind me, the mirror reflected a person frozen in fear. "Come on, get up," I whispered, my mouth dry. I pushed, but my knees started shaking violently. Time slowed. I realized, too late, there were no safety bars beneath, no one nearby. Only the gym attendant was visible, busy checking a phone. Then everything happened at once. My strength gave out. I felt myself tipping, backwards, helpless. The bar slid off my shoulders. The metallic groan of the weights filled my head as gravity took over. My skull hit the ground with a dull, wet sound. The pain shot down my spine, white hot, blinding. I tasted blood. It was real. Something warm trickled down my scalp, soaked into my shirt. The world blurred around me. Above, fluorescent lights flickered and twisted into wicked shapes. Sounds became distorted. Clanging weights, shouts, and rushed footsteps echoing through the cavernous space. I tried to move, but the pain pinned me. The bar had landed across my upper back, pressing me against the floor, helpless as an insect pinned for display. Panic made me shake. I could hear laughter, then gasps. A crowd formed, phones raised, faces pale and stretched with horror or pity or both. Hands reached for me, voices blurting questions. "Are you okay? Don't move. Stay with us." Everything seemed wrapped in a thick, suffocating fog. I felt every eye on me, strangers, trainers, the gym manager whispering into a phone. Sirens began to wail outside, drawing nearer. I focused on the lights above me, specks swimming across my vision. My mind clawed for reason. How bad is it? Will I walk again? Around me, the faces blurred in and out, as if some force wanted me to see their fear. The paramedics arrived, bright uniforms, cool, calm voices, latex gloves. They lifted the bar, rolled me onto a stretcher. The pain was a tide I couldn't fight. Blood smeared the mat where my head had lain. My shame seemed deeper than the pain. Half naked, weak, surrounded by strangers who now knew my weakness. As they carried me past the crowd, I heard someone whisper, "He didn't set the safety bars." What was he thinking? Inside the ambulance, as they stitched my scalp and checked my spine, the lights blurred into tunnels of color. My hands shook. I would remember the feeling of cold iron, the echo of laughter turned to horror, for years. Never had a place meant for strength made me feel so alone, so fragile. Now, When darkness falls or I walk by a gym, I still smell iron, hear the distant clang of weights, taste the memory of blood. It's a warning, and a secret I share only with those who dare to ignore the little voice that says, "Today, something in the air is different, and you'd better listen, before the weights crush not just your body, but everything inside you." Story 2. It's strange, the things you notice from the treadmill at midnight. The gym is quieter then, too quiet, with reflections in every window and the hum of machines sounding like distant whispers. I always thought the late hours would give me peace. Instead, that was when I learned there are worse things than loneliness. I saw him first in the mirrors. He wore plain clothes, sweats, a hoodie with the hood hanging loose. At first, I barely noticed him. He hovered near the squat racks, rolling his phone in his palm. Most late-night regulars mind their own business. He didn't. I stretched and heard footsteps, soft but not soft enough. When I grabbed a barbell, there he was, leaning in close, breath sour and eyes too bright. "Need a spot?" he asked. His voice was oily, meant to sound friendly but scraping at my nerves. "No thanks. I'm good." I forced a tight smile and turned away, hoping he'd take the hint. He didn't. Instead, he lingered just behind me, hands in his pockets, staring with a grin that never reached his eyes. Every few minutes he crept closer. "Sure you don't want help? Hate to see a pretty girl struggle." I tried to ignore him, focusing on my reps, but the way he watched made my skin crawl. Whenever I glanced around, I found him in the mirrored walls, always watching, always smiling. He started to get bolder. As I racked my weights, he sidled up so close I felt the heat of his body. "You ever train alone this late? Not safe, you know." He said it like a joke, but his eyes never left my face. I felt my heart thudding, fast, angry. I said I'm fine, I replied, my voice louder than I meant. He leaned in, whispering something I didn't catch. The world narrowed. There was only me and him and the sharp smell of disinfectant on the gym floor. I moved toward the treadmill, but he followed, footsteps in sync with mine. The gym suddenly felt too big and too empty, a box of cold glass and steel where any sound could vanish unheard. He began pacing between the machines, circling me while pretending to check his phone. My skin prickled. I gripped my keys and glanced at the emergency exit. He spoke again, this time louder. "You don't have to act tough. I can take care of you." He reached out as if to touch my arm. The world seemed to drop out from beneath my feet. That's when I heard another voice, deep and steady. My boyfriend. He'd come to pick me up as he often did. He appeared between us in an instant, his hand on my shoulder, shielding me from the stranger. "Is there a problem?" That steady, protective anger in his voice. The man backed off, brows raised, hands raised in mock surrender. "Nah, just trying to be friendly." He chuckled and melted away to the far end of the gym. I thought it was over. I thought I was safe, But he didn't leave, not really. The next day, staff showed us footage. The same man had been caught on cameras, not just with me. He'd been following women, waiting until they left alone, trailing them to their cars. Sometimes he stood outside the locker rooms, phone raised at odd angles, collecting pictures of bodies unaware. Security found dozens of snapshots on his abandoned gym bag, pictures of me, of others, close-ups of faces flickering with unease. The police called it stalking, a simple word for something that changed the way I saw myself, the way I moved through the world. For weeks, every reflection became a warning, every footstep behind me a threat. I stopped going at night, stopped wearing headphones, learned the small rituals of moving through rooms full of eyes. Sometimes, even now, I wake mid-dream with the memory of that grin, that feeling of being prey. The hum of treadmills and clank of weights echo through the dark, telling me I will never truly be alone. Not again. Not after I learned how thin the walls are between safety and fear, and how sometimes the scariest place in the world is a room full of mirrors, with nowhere to hide but yourself. Story 3. You never forget the moment you realize someone is watching you, even when you shouldn't have to worry about it. For me, that moment happened on an ordinary Tuesday, but what followed was anything but ordinary. If you think the gym is just about sweat and muscle, let me tell you, sometimes it's about fear. I always liked the west corner of the gym at noon, where sunbeams spilled through high windows and the squat racks squeaked in a comforting rhythm. But on that day, it felt like the air itself held a secret. I noticed him almost by accident, a tall man, pale as glass, drifting between machines without ever touching a single piece of equipment. The first time our eyes met in the mirrored wall, he flinched. I might have brushed it off if I hadn't seen his hands. On his phone, screen angled low, he was not doom scrolling or changing playlists. He was pointing the camera at women, sometimes catching faces, sometimes lingering over bodies. Every time one of us adjusted our hair or bent to wipe a bench, I watched the little red light on his screen. The creep was recording something twisted in my stomach. Should I confront him? As I hesitated, my own reflection seemed to crack. A cold sweat broke out. I did what I thought was right. I snapped a quick photo when he turned and emailed it, along with a message, to the gym's front desk. Then, heart hammering, I approached the manager as soon as I finished my set. She listened, barely, eyes on the clock. "Are you sure?" she said. "Maybe you misunderstood. People film workouts for all sorts of reasons." Her voice was smooth, the kind that doesn't believe you. Another staff member asked if I might be exaggerating, if maybe I was just uncomfortable with men in general. I showed them my photo. They shrugged. "Nothing we can really do without evidence of intent, sorry. If something happens again, let us know." I wanted to scream, but all I did was leave, hugging my arms across my chest. That night, I barely slept. I twisted in the sheets, replaying each moment. What if he'd already followed someone home? What if he'd do it again? The next week, I went back, half dread, half defiance. At first, all was normal, but as I did lunges by the mirrors, there he was again. Same dead eyes, same phone clutched tightly. This time, I could swear he was angling his camera for close shots of a young woman at the cable machine, her headphones in, oblivious. Adrenaline pounded through me. I moved to block his shot, giving him a glare that said, "I see you." He turned, lips curling in a thin sneer, and slithered off behind a weight rack. I ran straight to the desk, voice shaking, demanding they call the police. It was only when I threatened to post everything online that staff finally relented and dialed emergency services. The police came quickly, officers in dark blue, notebooks at the ready. They reviewed my photos, watched him on the security tapes, saw him scrolling through videos in real time. They spoke to the managers. Then, after far too much waiting, they told me what nobody should ever have to hear. "Unfortunately, ma'am, due to procedural requirements, unless a victim is shown on camera in a state of private exposure or confirms consent was not given, we can't arrest him. We'll issue a formal warning." The man was approached, questioned, and then he simply smiled, signed a form, and walked out. I watched him disappear through the glass doors, my skin crawling. He could come back any time. He could do this again anywhere. The gym sent an apologetic email. "Thank you for your vigilance. We strive to keep all members safe." That night, I lay awake haunted by his stare flickering across the darkened ceiling. I kept wondering how many other gyms he haunted while everyone looked away. What unsettled me most wasn't just the man and his camera, but the way my words, my photo, my fear were all so easily brushed aside. I learned, in those glaring lights and mirrored walls, that sometimes the scariest thing isn't the person in the shadows, but the silence that lets him slip right back in. And every time I lace up my shoes, step through another set of automatic doors, I wonder if this time someone will finally watch out for us before it's too late. Story 4. Some nights, the gym feels like a second home. Others, it turns into something else entirely. Someplace shadows slither along walls and silence gnaws at your nerves. That's what happened last Friday, when I was alone closing up. Everything started normal, but it ended with the kind of fear that clings to you long after the lights flicker out. I'd always thought the echoing sound of weights and hum of vending machines would make me feel safe. That night, they were the only thing reminding me that I was still in the world of the living. It was well past closing, and as I checked the last treadmill and shut down the juice bar, I noticed something that shouldn't have been there. A faint, wet outline of footprints leading into the locker room. It was odd. I was certain everyone had left. I called out, "Is anyone still here?" My voice bounced off tile and metal, much louder than I expected, and came back to me hollow, empty, no answer. Something about the echoes made my skin prickle. I grabbed my flashlight and walked inside. Rows of lockers loomed dark, their doors ajar like mouths holding secrets. I scanned each stall, empty, except for the last one, behind a battered gray stall door. I saw them, a pair of legs. They weren't moving. I felt my pulse jump. "Hello? We're closed," I called, forcing a professional tone. No answer. The legs didn't twitch, not even when I knocked sharply, 3 times. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I should have walked away. Instead, curiosity pushed me closer. I leaned down, peering beneath the gap. The shoes were old, crusted with mud. There was something off about how the ankles bent, unnaturally stiff, perfectly still. Suddenly, a soft scraping sound drifted from behind the stall, like fingers dragging across tile. My brain raced. Was someone hurt? Sleeping? Playing a prank? I swallowed, trying not to imagine how shadows seemed to gather around those silent shoes. I stood up and fumbled for my phone with shaking hands. That's when, in the gym outside, the clanging of weight machines shattered the silence. It sounded wrong. No one should be lifting this late. The sound came in brutal, heavy snaps, as if metal was being forced against metal by something that didn't care about noise or consequence or human hands. I froze. The hair on my arms stood straight up. I tried to call the police, but my fingers kept missing the buttons, heart pounding so hard I could barely think. From the locker room, I could see out just a sliver through the door. The lights over the squat rack flickered. A weight fell with a clang, then another, as if someone, or something, was racing from machine to machine. But the gym had been empty just 15 minutes ago. Desperate. I banged harder on the stall. "Are you all right? I need you to come out." No voice, no movement at all. But the scraping had stopped. For a moment, silence hung heavy. I stepped backwards, every footstep echoing too loud, too long. That's when my phone finally dialed out, and I gasped out what was happening. "There's someone in the restroom. The gym is supposed to be closed. I think something's wrong." As I waited, fear gnawed in my bones. The machines outside kept clanging, then stopped abruptly. I heard the distant pulse of sirens approaching. And just like that, the legs behind the door shifted, sliding backwards until they vanished. I heard, low and muffled, a strange, wet laugh. The police arrived quickly, their flashlights slicing open every shadow in the gym. They checked every corner, every locker. When they opened the last stall, it was empty, except for that pair of shoes, arranged neatly, facing the wall. That wet trail was gone. They told me it was probably a homeless person hiding, maybe something less dangerous. I nodded, but inside I knew something else had claimed the gym that night, something that lurked when the doors locked and the world grew quiet. Now, when I close up, I always check those stalls first. Sometimes, in the silence after midnight, I swear I still hear the scraping and the clang of machines coming from the empty gym floor. I know I should quit, but something in the darkness feels like it's waiting. For me, for anyone not fast enough to leave before closing time. Story 5. They say pain is the body's way of keeping you humble. I learned that truth under the blinding lights of the gym, surrounded not by encouragement, but by the cold gaze of pity. If only I'd listened, just once, to the warnings echoing between the dumbbells. I still remember the first day I stepped into Iron City Gym, the clang of weights, the musk of sweat, every rep, every shout, tempting me to be bolder, tougher. That Tuesday felt different. My nerves buzzed with an ugly resolve. I'd watched others deadlift twice my body weight. How hard could it be? I didn't need a coach or a lecture on proper form. I needed results. A trainer saw me loading up the bar. "Hey, first time deadlifting? Can I show you how to set your back? Avoid injury, you know." "No thanks," I grinned, shrugging off the hand he offered. His mouth twisted, but he turned away, still comma. A trickle of doubt nagged. I shoved it down, rolling my shoulders and stepping to the bar. The first pull felt wrong, awkward weight, a strange twist. I ignored it. The room shrank to the rasp of steel, the pounding in my chest. I bent my knees, but my back rounded like a question mark. My grip trembled as I yanked the bar upward. A sharp, electric stab shot across my lower spine. My vision flashed white. I almost dropped the bar, but I clenched my teeth, forcing myself to finish. I heard a gasp behind me, someone watching, shaking their head. I hated that. Hated their doubt more than the hurt radiating through my body. "You really should let me show you," the trainer insisted, stepping close. I straightened too fast, hiding a wince. "You're going to get hurt." I said, "I'm fine," I snapped. "Just need to warm up." The lie burned, but my ego wouldn't let go. I loaded more weight. Sweat stung my eyes, the bar knurling, biting into my hands. I tried again, ignoring the fire in my back. The world blurred. With every repetition, the pain deepened, muted at first, then ragged and raw. A small crowd had gathered, whispers scraping my skin. The staff exchanged worried glances. Someone filmed. The trainer hovered, arms crossed. Again I yanked. No setup, just brute force. This time, an icy, searing bolt crawled up my spine and snapped me in half. I collapsed, bar clattering away, vision tunneling red and black. I couldn't move. A ringing filled my head, high, shrill, drowning out the voices gathering overhead. "Is he okay?" Idiot. I told him. Hands hovered, but nobody wanted to touch my shame. Lying on the mat, I finally saw their faces, tight with fear and something colder. The trainer tried to roll me onto my side. I screamed, my pride finally buried beneath agony. The ambulance lights painted the walls in blue. I bit my lip, refusing to cry, even as the paramedics slid a board beneath me. My ego, my ignorance, had led me here, pinned beneath something much heavier than any barbell back in my hospital bed. The doctor's words churned in the fluorescent silence. "Severe muscle strain. Lucky your spine's intact. Months of rest, maybe longer." He didn't bother with sympathy. Sometimes at night, pain pulses through my back, echoing every step, every turn. Now I know what haunts the gym. It isn't ghosts or shadows. It's injured pride, the echo of warnings ignored, and the chilling cost of thinking pain makes you invincible. When the world is silent and you can't move, that's when you remember the rules, the people who tried to help you, and how thin the line is between ambition and horror. If you ever see someone lifting wrong, don't just warn them. Grab their hand, pull them back from the edge before they learn, like I did, how pain never whispers. It screams. Story 6. There's something cruel about coming back too soon, like the world is silently waiting to punish you for forgetting how fragile you really are. I learned that the hard way, after taking a break from the gym, and I wish I could tell you it was just soreness. The truth was far worse. It started with excitement. After months off, dust settling on my gym shoes, I felt ready. I craved the rush of heavy weights, the burn of pushing limits. I signed up for advanced classes, those brutal sessions that separate the weak from the strong. I told myself this time I'd conquer everything. The first day, I was full of fire. The barbell felt electric in my palms. The instructor called for the heavy lifts, deadlifts, squats, presses. My muscles screamed, but I pushed harder than ever. The burn wasn't pain, it was progress. By the third day, my body was a battlefield. Every movement sent shockwaves through my limbs. I ignored the warnings, the sharp twinge in my calves, the stiffness in my shoulders, the ache deep in my back. Keep going, I told myself. It's just getting tougher before it gets better. That night, I barely slept. My muscles felt like concrete, heavy and unyielding. When I stood, my legs trembled, unsteady as if I'd aged decades overnight. By morning, walking was a nightmare, each step a reminder of my folly. The days grew darker. I could barely climb stairs, my body locked in a prison of soreness and exhaustion. Everyday tasks became unbearable chores. Simple things like sitting or reaching for a cup felt like scaling mountains. Friends asked if I was okay. I smiled and said, just sore. But inside, terror grew. What if this was permanent? What if pushing too hard cracked something inside me? I started to dread moving, to fear falling apart. One evening, I sat in my bedroom, legs swollen and pulsing, when I heard a low, slow creak. It wasn't the house settling, it was my body, reminding me it wasn't built to be shattered all at once. The next morning, I visited a doctor. He shook his head, eyes grave. You're suffering from severe muscle fatigue. You pushed too hard too soon. You need rest, a lot of it. No heavy lifting for weeks, maybe months. I nodded, stunned. My pride shattered. How had I thought I was stronger than my own body? The pain wasn't just physical, it was a warning etched deep into my bones. The gym, once a place of triumph, now haunted my every thought. For days, I lay motionless, trapped in a fragile new reality. The weight of my mistake pressed heavier than any barbell had. I mourned the strength I lost, the future I jeopardized for a fleeting taste of glory. Now, when I see others rush back too fast, ignoring the whispers of their aching muscles, I want to shout. Muscle fatigue isn't just soreness, it's the body screaming for mercy. And if you don't listen, it becomes your worst nightmare. I learned too late that strength needs patience. Because sometimes the hardest lift isn't the barbell, it's knowing when to stop. If you ever find yourself dancing on the edge of pain, remember me, and the haunting price of pushing beyond your limits without respect. Your body will fight back, and it won't be gentle. Don't let ambition become your horror story. Rest, heal, then rise stronger, steady, not shattered. For more stories like this, share and subscribe Goofy Horror.